all the excitement of the Hunger Games, minus the dead children. This is the Talkin' Boxing with Billy C show.
Talkin' Boxing with Billy C.
Now let's dig into our archives and hear a rare interview when Billy C first became the champion of boxing talk radio. Hello, Billy C. As the new champ, can we ask you a few questions?
Why, certainly.
Okay, your fans would like to know how you and your corner have successfully walloped the competition.
We're not ordinary people. We're morons.
Anything else?
I'm a victim of circumstance.
Did your success finally come when you made the show 5 days a week for 2 hours? What do you think?
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Now, please tell the listeners what you've learned from making it this far.
Certainly. If at first you don't succeed, keep on sucking till you do succeed.
Great words of wisdom, Billy C. Keep up the great work as the undisputed People's Champion with your show, Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. Any last words to anyone who's listening?
This is your fault, you bonehead.
And we're back. You're listening to the Talkin' Boxing with Billy C show right here on ESPN New Hampshire. Glad you guys could join us. And listen, don't forget about checking out our website, www.billycboxing.com, for all the latest news. Well, if you're looking for the latest news, look under the section that says latest news, okay? Because there's other sections on that website, man. So not all the latest news is on the front page. There are some things, but bang around the site. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Well, it's that time again.
Blast from the past. We shine the spotlight again on fighters from years past.
Top-ranking heavyweight. Joe Louis is the leading contender.
Joe Frazier with a left hook. Good right hand thrown by Foreman that time. Look at that left hook. Belt that goes to Ray Mancini.
It's Blast from the Past on Talkin' Boxing.
And this week's Blast from the Past, which is being brought to us by KO Fantasy Boxing. Check it out, www.kofantasyboxing.com. Features a pretty unique fighter, a guy that, like you'll hear me saying a little bit, fought everybody. But he's a former world champion and a Boxing Hall of Famer, Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. And joining me right now, one leg and all, my man Alex Pierpaoli. What's up, brother?
Good evening, Billy C. How are you?
What happened, man? Before we get started, I caught in the corner of my eye. You hurt your knee? Are you still going to be able to go up to the Hall of Fame or what?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a shot. I can't believe it. It was just a freak injury. I hurt myself with kitty litter. I
was wondering. That's what I was asking. Why you keep trying to go to the bathroom in the cat box? Why don't you just use the bathroom like the rest of us, man?
Yeah, it was my cat. My sister's taking care of my cats while I'm gone, and I was bringing a couple of bags of kitty litter that I bought the other day, bringing them upstairs, and I don't know, just the way I had a 25-pound bag in each hand, and was going up the stairs, and as I must have turned the knee or something, I don't know, but I got this shooting pain and almost fell, and yeah, it hurts, but it feels like it's my ACL, but it can't be torn. It just must be strained, because I'd be weeping like a little girl.
You would if it was your ACL. You wouldn't be chatting right now as calm, cool, and collective as you are. That's for sure.
I must have just strained it or something, because I could feel it right under my kneecap there. So.
Well, that sucks. But anyway, enough about you. Tell us about Philadelphia Jack O'Brien.
Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, whose real name was actually James Francis Hagan, and he was born January 17th, 1878. He actually shares a birthday with the greatest, Muhammad Ali himself. He was born in Philadelphia. This is probably the guy that people often talk about the most when you talk about Philly fighters. We're talking about one of the pioneers in the sport. Born 1878 and started boxing, 1896 was when his pro career started. So we're talking turn of the century. Marquis at Queensberry rules, had just within 20 years of them starting, and he was born into a big family. He was one of 8 kids, had 7 sisters. So he learned to fight early just for time in the bathroom, from what I understand.
Well, not only did he have to fight his way to the bathroom and probably to get a potato for dinner, but he fought quite the collection of fighters from 1896 through his last fight of 1912, didn't he?
He sure did. And, I mean, he is one of those guys where, like you say, he fought everybody. And I think the fact that he's a pioneer was another major factor. I mean, this is a guy, if you were an Irish kid, you were sort of expected to look up to Jim Corbett. But he didn't. Not only did he idolize him, but he really fought. He fought similarly. He was more of a boxer. A speed marvel is something they refer to him quite a bit. He was much more of a boxer than a bruiser. Really sharp puncher, and he did. One of the things that not only did he fight really talented guys, but he was an international figure, and he had went overseas. And really marketed himself very well. I think it was a combination of things, both having some difficulty getting fights here in the U.S., as well as seeing that, there was maybe better opportunities to get bigger paychecks against lesser opposition, perhaps, in the UK, and that's what he did. And he had 18 fights there. He won them all. I think 4 of them were DQs. The rest were KOs. 1 fight in France, the rest in the UK. But you're right. Then he was part of the very first. I think he's the 3rd guy to hold the light heavyweight championship. And as a matter of fact, it seems that Jack Root did he create the division? Because I guess that was one of the things about Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. I mean, if he fought today, it would have been fascinating to see how many titles he won, Bill, because he would have won titles probably from 154 to cruiserweight, because that's the range he fought. But back then, it was only 2 divisions, middleweight and heavyweight, and then in 1903, the first light heavyweight first light heavyweight champion was Jack Root. O'Brien just came along 2 years later.
He actually, it's weird. We talk about catchweights today, and he actually held catchweight world titles. It's pretty strange. I'll get to that in a second, but I just want to mention, this guy, I mean, it sounds like he fought for 40 years. He started in 1896. His last fight was 1912. But if you do the math, it was 16 years as a pro. And, we've done a lot of these blasts, Alex, where, these guys have fought in excess of 20 years throughout their career. But when I took a look at this guy, I was amazed to see, just focusing on, now he fought a lot in the early part of his career. But check this out. In 1897, he fought 17 times. In 1898, he fought 15 as well as he did 15 times in 1898, 99, 1900, 1901. In 1902, he fought 33 times in that year, 27 in 1903, 19 in 1904, and then for the remainder of his career, from 1905 to 1912, when he was more of an established, marquee fighter, 35 times. But unbelievable to be fighting in excess of over 15 times a year from the beginning of his career all the way up until 1905, which, he still had a lot of time left after that. But to me, that was an amazing stat that I stumbled across.
Yeah, it's amazing that these guys, the activity rate, there's just no comparison to the fighters of today, and even to recent eras, the 70s and 80s and 60s when guys were busier than they are today. I mean, they didn't rack up the fights. There was one time where he fought two guys at 2 6-rounders in one night.
Yeah, 1906.
And there was another thing that a thing about Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, and that some of the white fighters of this day, there was Jim Crow was the way of the land here in the United States, and that was how that was played out in boxing, was the color line, and promoters didn't put fights together that often between white mixed race bouts. In some places they were illegal. Sometimes it was just plain they were afraid to put them on because of fan reaction. But Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, I mean, there were some fighters, his idol, Jim Corbett, who just would not fight black men. Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, though, he crossed the color line. He fought Jack Blackburn. He fought Sam Langford, Bobby Dobbs. He fought Frank Craig, the coffee cooler, George Cole. He actually won. He got knocked out, but won anyway, over young Peter Jackson, another great black fighter. That was a weird fight, Bill, where he got... one of the things they did back then every now and then, where they would make this agreement to have clean breaks, and I guess that fight between young Peter Jackson and Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, they had agreed it was going to be a clean break fight, and the referee was separating them, and he had one hand, I guess, on O'Brien's shoulder and was sort of pushing them apart when Peter Jackson fired a shot and knocked him out. So the ref counted O'Brien out, but then held up his hand. So it's sort of a little confusing to the crowd, but he won on a foul because they had that agreement. So that's weird. I mean, you never see that kind of thing nowadays where they had, sort of clean breaks.
No, but you just see some crazy scorecards. But he fought young Peter Jackson a bunch of times. He fought Joe Walcott. You're continuing that. Peter Mayer. I mean, all those guys. He fought. He also fought and beat Joe Chowinski, which was fought him a few times. But that was a guy who beat Jack Johnson, and he fought Jack Johnson as well, which I want to talk about that fight in a little bit, but let's just look at his titles real quick. They were hard to track because, of this crazy stuff. From what I gather, his first world title, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, took place in 1903 when he beat Jack Twin Sullivan for the 158-pound world middleweight title, which I found amazing because he defended that and lost that title, the 158-pound world title. And then a light heavyweight title against Bob Fitzsimmons was fought for the 170-pound light heavyweight title. So he was fighting some crazy catchweights, it appears to me.
Yeah, it does seem that way. And it's strange because some of these fights, it seems like he might have come in a little lighter than the maximum. Like that was one of the reasons why I thought, because some of these fights, he's fighting light heavyweights, but he's coming in only like 164. That's what they consider a light heavyweight. If you were over 160, you're a light heavyweight.
Right, because
so you're right. There is some.
Right, because they didn't have the super middleweight division. But I also found fascinating that in 1904. He fought Tommy Burns, who would eventually become the heavyweight world champion, and he beat Tommy Burns with a six-round newspaper decision, and that fight was fought at 158 pounds. 2 years later, he fought Tommy Burns with a 20-round draw. That Tommy Burns was the world heavyweight champion at that time, and it was a 20-round draw, and then he would have a rematch again for the world heavyweight title, and he would lose a 20-round decision on points, which I thought was pretty amazing that he fought a future world heavyweight champion at 158, and 2 years later he fought him twice for the heavyweight title.
Yeah, that is crazy. And what's weird about that, when they fought that 20-rounder, O'Brien only weighed 163 and a half, and Burns only weighed 172.
I was going to say, I
world heavyweight title bout for two guys that are under 175.
Right. I don't even think Tommy Burns ever weighed more than 183, to be honest with you. And let's talk a little about...
Yes, and isn't there a famous photo, or maybe it's the Ketchel photo, where he's standing next to Jack... Yeah, I think it is Ketchel, where he's standing next to Jack Johnson, and he actually has, like, extra padding underneath his coat just to make him look bigger. These guys were not anywhere near the size of athletes today. And Burns, you're right, was a very small heavyweight.
Well, the guy who would beat Burns, Jack Johnson, fought Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. And it was a weird fight, man. It was 1909, and it was scheduled for 6 rounds. Now, legally, they weren't allowed to render a decision unless there was a knockout, I guess. So they went to... But here's the thing. It was a 6-round fight that the title was on the line. Because if Philadelphia Jack O'Brien would have knocked out Jack Johnson, the title would have changed hands. But because it went to distance, there was no decision rendered. It was a newspaper decision. And it doesn't go down as a title. It's really weird how they would have ruled that. And here's some stuff about that fight. Jack Johnson, many people believed that Philadelphia Jack O'Brien was going to outbox Jack Johnson. It was almost even going into that fight in terms of odds and stuff. And I found that pretty strange, considering the size difference, which I also thought was strange. Both of these guys gave their weight prior to the fight. Neither one of them had to step on a scale. Jack Johnson claimed he weighed 201 pounds, and everyone's going, nah, he weighs closer to 220. He didn't train, he didn't do this. So I find that kind of strange that they pretty much were making up their own rules as they were going along.
That is very strange, and it does seem to be a weird era, and I did not get an answer as to exactly why that happened. But Philadelphia Jack O'Brien never defended the light heavyweight title. All those fights, none of them, I guess, were an official title defense. So the title, the word that Cyber Boxing Zone uses is the title became moribund. So it just sort of sat there. At that time, several people claimed the title. Bob Fitzsimmons. There was a New York Commission champion, Bob Moha, and then Jack Dillon became the man, the man who beat the man when he beat Hugo Kelly and Levinsky and then Moa. So I think that, and then Jack Dillon takes over the division in 1914. But yeah, that's strange, and I think that's probably the question, because that's one of the things is that, I certainly don't purport to be an expert on anything. I'm learning a lot about these guys every week, when I do these things too. So that's a question. Sometimes the more research you do, you just come up with better questions. And I think that's the question I would have. And next is like, what happened with that period? Why he never did defend it? Because that is sort of odd.
Well, I mean, the funny thing about the World Light Heavyweight title is that he beat Bob Fitzsimmons for it, who was also claiming that he was the World Heavyweight titleist at the time. He was 44 years old. And you're right, he never put that title on the line, and that was in 1905. He fought another 7 years after that. He challenged for the...
and he had some great names. He fought Ketchel, and the Ketchel fight was supposed to be an incredible fight. He was saved by the bell. He was knocked out of the ring down into the ring rosin pit where they would put their feet to get a little more traction in the ring. So you would have thought that fight, even that fight was unsanctioned for the title.
Well, the thing is that he seemed to be going after the money and the heavyweight division after he beat Bob Fitzsimmons, because the Ketchel fight, that fight set up the win over when Stanley Ketchel beat Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. He actually beat him twice. That set up the fight for Jack Johnson when Stanley Ketchel fought Jack Johnson. So, it was there were all these ties. And he fought some big names in the heavyweight division, gatekeeper type guys like Fireman Jim Flynn, who everybody seemed to fight. But you mentioned Sam Langford. It was one of his last fights. He fought him in 1911 and got stopped. It makes you wonder how old was Sam Langford? He wasn't exactly in his prime. He was already campaigning as a heavyweight, but he still had the knockout punch. All these names fighting around the same time. I like we say all the time, I would love to be able to go back in time and catch these guys all at the same night. Listen to all the names we're mentioning.
Yeah, it is crazy. And even guys, he had a win over Fireman Jim Flynn. That's another heavyweight contender of the age. Al Kaufman, he actually lost to him. So you're right. So that is a very old Sam Langford that he's facing in 1911, but still, to have the name... Well, Langford fought for another, 12 years, 11 years?
I was going to just say, he remembered...
Right,
just remember, Sam Langford ended up winning the Mexican heavyweight title when he was legally blind. That was the famous fight where he says, I can't see my opponent, just point me in the right direction, and he finished him off in 1 round or 2 rounds, something like that. But Philadelphia Jack O'Brien definitely fought all of them, and like you said, this guy was... definitely of sweet science definition. He wasn't known as a knockout puncher, although he did have quite a bit of knockouts when you look at the overall number. But what about his life after boxing? He died fairly young, but I know that what I saw was and no explanation, but it said after a financial reversal resulted in bankruptcy. So, how did he lose his money? Did you find that out? Because I know that he eventually was successful running a gym in New York City, but do you know what he was doing and how he lost his money before he went bankrupt?
No, I do not, and I just found his obituary a little while ago before I called in. But yes, he did... It looks like he, at one point he was going to join the service, but was considered in poor health afterwards. I guess this was for, to aid in the World War II effort. And he did, that was one of the things I did fail to mention. I have it in my notes here, but I must have missed it. He actually was like self-promoting. When he was in England, he even brought, I don't know if he wrote the stories, but he brought, gave accounts of what happened in his fights to the AP.
Well,
so that was one of the ways that he sort of got a buzz about himself, which is really a great idea when you think about it.
He tried to get in World War I. World War II, he didn't even live through World War II. He died in 1942. So
you're right. I'm sorry.
It had to be it had to be World War I. But he did, ironically enough, although everything that I ever heard about Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, one thing that never comes up is him as a trainer. But apparently he was in Jack Dempsey's corner when they fought the first time, Gene Tunney, and he was one of the trainers in Jack Dempsey's corner. So maybe that was his connection when he opened up his gym in New York City. So. But he did pass away at 64. Do you have any insight on what he died of?
It just says a long illness. He had been in ill health for some time. But yeah, you're right. What you were saying about the gym, it said he did open a gym in Quaker City, and then 3 years later moved it to New York. And actually worked out of the old Madison Square Garden for a while.
He was right on Broadway, his gym. His gym was right on Broadway, and it was successful in the 20s and the 30s. It was...
51st and Broadway. Huh.
Yeah,
you're right. It was, and I guess that was where he left. He left the gym about a year before he died. But I don't see where it says, what it was. Just old age, heart maybe, I don't know.
Who'd you put him in with? Which weight class did you pick?
I went with light heavyweight, because that's where his, his biggest title was, even though he fought at both above and below. I think today he probably would have been a cruiserweight. I mean, not a cruiserweight, my bad. Super middleweight.
Yeah.
But I put him in against Kovalev, Stevenson, and Hopkins, and Andre Ward. So first against Sergey Kovalev, he did pretty well. He the first time I had them fight, he won a majority decision by scores of 116, 114, 116, 115, and 115 each. And in that, there was 3 even rounds, actually, in that fight on one of the cards. Kovalev was cut in the 10th on an accidental, but when I had them fight 100 times, he gets the better of Kovalev, 87 wins, 11 defeats, 2 draws, and he was able to stop the Russian 13 times. Of Kovalev's 11 wins, he knocked out Philadelphia Jack 8 times.
If for just hold on one second, Alex. For anyone that's new to the show, Alex uses the Title Bout Championship computer game, which you can get by visiting our website, BillyCBoxing.com, and he sets up these simulations with the fighters that we pick for our Blast from the Past with our current top level fighters in the same weight classes. So when you hear him say, "I ran it once and this is how it came out, then I ran it 100 times," he's talking about the simulations for the Title Bout game. It's a pretty cool game, right, Alex? I mean, it's not so much like graphic oriented. It's geared towards exactly what we're doing here, really.
Right. It's much more of like a text-based type game. Not there's not images or animation.
So how did he do? How did he do against the second one?
Okay, so against Adonis Stevenson, when I had them fight the first time, O'Brien stopped him. He scored a TKO in the 8th round. He actually lost a point he TKO in the 12th round. He lost a point in the 8th round for low blows, and then he dropped Stevenson in the 12th, and then Stevenson rose from the knockdown, and he just, got stopped just raining blows upon him. When they fight 100 times, O'Brien gets the better of it. 88 wins, very close to Kovalev results, too, as a matter of fact. 88 wins for O'Brien, 12 defeats. He stopped Stevenson 25 times, and of Adonis Stevenson's 12 victories, he was able to stop O'Brien 4 times. So he dominates him a little more than Kovalev. Kovalev was able to get 2 draws. And now I had him in against the old man. You got to put him in against Hopkins. He's still hanging around here.
Definitely.
And against Hopkins, the first time they fought, Philadelphia Jack O'Brien that's a good fight, too, because you got the 2 ages of Philadelphia, the old and the new. So Philadelphia Jack O'Brien wins a unanimous decision, 2 scores of 115 to 112, and 1 score, very close fight, 114, 113. They fight 100 times, and Philadelphia Jack O'Brien gets the better of it. 62 wins, 26 defeats, 12 draws. He stopped Hopkins 5 times. Of Hopkins' 26 victories, he was able to stop O'Brien 7 times.
Wow.
And and finally against Andre Ward, this one I had them meet, because this is one of the things that's kind of cool about the game, is you could even choose the division of where to put them. You can't pick the poundage that they come in, but you could do it this way. Like, I selected O'Brien as a light heavyweight, and the bout was at light heavyweight. And Ward, who's a super middleweight, I clicked adjust for weight, so it would be one of those things where he was moving up. And when I do that, O'Brien dominates him. 62 victories, 21 defeats, 17 draws. He stopped Andre Ward 37 times. Of Ward's 21 victories, he stopped O'Brien twice. But if you look at those numbers, Ward is much closer to the Hopkins numbers than Kovalev or Stevenson.
Interesting about that, but great job. Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, former world middleweight and light heavyweight world champion. He was also a former world heavyweight title challenger. 16 years as a pro, 194 total fights under his belt, 92 wins, 56 coming by knockout. He did have 8 losses in which he was only stopped 5 times. He had 14 draws of his newspaper decisions, another 55 wins there, 9 losses and 12 draws, 1,214 rounds as a pro with a 30% knockout ratio. And, of course, he was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and that took place in 1994. And speaking of the International Boxing Hall of Fame, that's happening this week. And, Alex, you can still stick around for a couple minutes?
Sure thing.
All right, good. Great job with the blast. I'm going to take a short break, and when we come back, we got some other questions to ask Alex. So don't go anywhere. We should be back in about 2.